Vietnam. What do we think about it? We've had a pretty good trip here in Vietnam. Vietnam it's enigmatic. It's enchanting. It's like nowhere else. But I've said that about the other places. I mean, they're all so unique, and like Southeast Asia, categorically, it might be easy for us from North America to really lump them all together because there's just enough similarities that you can do that coming from the West. However, as you're traveling through these countries, you really start to pick up on they're all just so completely different, just enough that it's a totally new experience when you go from Thailand to Malaysia to Vietnam, for example, and now we'll be moving on to a fourth one. So I think the biggest, God, there's just so many positives. I've just fallen in love with Vietnam in such unexpected ways. But the first big positive is it's so affordable. It's so much more affordable than Thailand or Malaysia. Food, transportation, things like that, those expenses, it's maybe just slightly more affordable than Thailand and Malaysia. But your cost of lodging is, I mean, it's like half the price. Well, let me walk that back a little bit, because when you're in Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City, Saigon, or Hanoi, it's right about at the same price as what you're doing in Thailand and Malaysia. But as soon as you get into the in-between those major cities. Now, the reason why that is important to know is I wouldn't even recommend trying to search ahead of time or beating yourself up over how do I search for rentals, long-term rentals, because at that price, it's affordable enough to stay in a hotel long-term until you figure out what you're gonna do. Meet a local network, find a Facebook group of people that can help you have a soft landing if you decide you want to stay long-term. I think as an American, the surprise element maybe had such a powerful impact on my love affair with Vietnam. And by that I mean, it's very much a part of America's collective consciousness, the history of the war, or at least with people my generation and older, maybe our young, not so much, but you know, the popular movies in our cultural library, definitely, they just leave, it's a forever mark of, you know, the weight and seriousness of everything that happened here and all the consequences of that. So I was very nervous to come here and how I would be received. And the reaction that I've received from everybody, like, here's the deal. Every time somebody asks me where I'm from, I will tell them I'm from America. And you cannot fake their reaction of, it's a very warm reception. Man, I've just loved this place. I'm definitely coming back. I mean, like, okay, so let's talk about, we started in Saigon, Ho Chi Minh. We went to Nha Trang. We went to Da Nang. We went down to Hoi An for a bit, back up to Da Nang for a bit. We went to Hue, and then up to Ninh Bình, and now we're here in Hanoi. I mean, that's a lot of places to go see, but I didn't even touch half of my list, and my list was getting longer as time went on because I was getting tips from locals about, like, oh no, don't go there. That's where all the tourists go. You don't want to do that. Go here. So I definitely have to come back to Vietnam. So I got the 90-day multiple entry visa. It was pointless to get the multiple entry visa, which just means that if somewhere in the middle I wanted to cross the border into Cambodia or Laos or go over to the Philippines, I can do that. And then I still have permission to come back on that same visa without applying for a new one. But like as if I was, I ran out of time as it is. I don't have any more time. I've still got at least one more 90-day visa to even feel like I've scratched the surface appropriately. Okay, so visas. For Americans, you have to apply for e-visa ahead of time. When you search online for this, there are many options that show up in your search claiming to be official, but a lot of them are not. So you need to be sure you're using the official government website, not handing over your credit card information. The best way to know that, if you're an American, is go to the US State Department website, go to the Vietnam connection site, and there is a link there that takes you to it. Now, the single most important thing to do, because Vietnam is very detail oriented when it comes to these visas, pay attention, get your details right. And the two biggest places that's going to be a problem is, it says like first name, last name. Well, if you have a middle name, that middle name goes in the first name block, right? So you would have one last name, but two first names, if that makes any sense. And here's what happened to me that got me in trouble. So my last name, for the first time ever, State Department on my passport put a little space in between my Caucasian descent name. It's very small, it's hard to see. It's not on any of my other IDs. Maybe I made this mistake, maybe they did. I don't know, I didn't even know it. But the Vietnamese government picked up on it. And so when I applied for my visa and I typed in my information, I did not include a space. So my visa came back rejected, which the process takes about a week or so. So I came back rejected. Well, I had to submit again, not knowing what I had done wrong. So it was the middle name got me in trouble, and the space. So what's the bottom line is, whatever your passport says, it needs to reflect exactly that, including a little space. So once I started flying from Malaysia into Vietnam, at every checkpoint, people are like roping me to the side, like, I don't know if you can go into the country, even though I had an approved e-visa. And they're, calling our headquarters, oh my gosh, can we let this joker through? I mean, this must have happened 5 times along the way until I finally get to the desk of the customs immigration agent. And at that point, I think my name had been brought up so many times that there must have been a flag in the computer where they're like, let him through, it's fine. Yeah, probably not. Okay, so there's that, right? Accuracy against exactly what your passport says. Middle name goes with the first name, with a space there. And here in Vietnam, it's so easy to slow travel. It's so easy to just stay where you're at and keep exploring, because like around every street corner, there's just more good food. I totally understand how and why people stay here long term, were it not for the guilt that you feel because you are driven to go see the next thing in Vietnam, and like north to south in this S-shaped, it's a very big country, and these are long segments between each place. Everywhere I've been so far in Vietnam, there's something for everybody, from the most Spartan of conditions to the highest level of resort conditions. And I try to do things, I wouldn't say lowest common denominator, but sort of moving like the locals do with the locals, sort of to prove and teach that it can be done so that you can keep a really, really tight budget. The language barrier here it's very real, but it's also unpredictable. There's plenty of times, it's almost a day in, day out basis where you'll be around somebody working in a position where you would think they would speak good English, and they don't speak any English. And then there's times where you wouldn't expect anybody to speak English at all, and people speak fluent, beautiful English. So you never can tell. And that brings up a good follow-on point, which is reserving your judgment, because you will be sent mixed messages all the time. And that language barrier, or the inconsistency in that language barrier, is just one example that you're always trying to form judgments to put things in a box. And as soon as you think you've got that wrapped up and packaged up, something's gonna happen that's just, sets you right back to the beginning. So it's almost like, just don't even bother, just take things one step at a time. The one thing that is predictable, and I sat down with I met a British journalist. We spent a day together drinking coffee, hiding from the rain, and what a brilliant day it was. And we were both trying to put into words, what is this like? How would you explain this to somebody who had never been here? And we just couldn't do it, and still to this day I can't do it. But what we did agree upon is, what hits you the hardest and the fastest is this whole traffic situation here, right? It is, it's happening all around us right now. It's around the clock. The noise is just incessant. It's constant. Honking. And like 75% of the honking is not even necessary, but it just comes at you from all angles, and it's The traffic is different here than, say, for example, in the United States, where in the US, everything about how you move from point A to point B is guided somewhat by right-of-way. Whether you're in a vehicle, whether you're moving as a pedestrian, everything, you have your place you're supposed to be and when you're supposed to go, and that defines how lines or queues are formed, and that just doesn't exist here. So traffic moves more in this hive mind way. You know, the honking here is not a hostile act, it's not a response to a hostile act for the most part. It's just sort of this constant people giving each other heads up notifications of, I'm here, I'm about to do something crazy. In the beginning, it's sort of like just this most shocking thing. And then you go through this phase of fascination where you're philosophically trying to explain it to yourself, like, oh, you know, in America, we line up in a straight line to do something, and here that doesn't really work. It's like a gaggle lineup is how it works here. You know, and then you get to this point where you can't really explain it so much, so it just becomes amusing. And then you get to this point where I'm at 3 months later, which is like, it's just fatiguing. It's just so constant and oppressive, actually, that it's very fatiguing. So I came from Ninh Binh, where it's still happening there, but that's a much quieter place. And I get here in Hanoi, which is just, this place is insane. And it's totally exhausting. Like, I can't even be in the old town area. You know, you got these narrow alleyways, and people on their motorbikes are just like flying down the alleyways where it's like they have no business even being there, and they're laying on their horns like expecting you to get out of the way. They'll just pretty much mow you over. So, you know, that's a downside where could I ever really get over that and live in peace in Vietnam with that? I don't know. It's very obvious to me now, 3 months in, how exhausting and frustrating that actually is. They're at the beginning of a 20-year process of building metros around Saigon and Hanoi and high-speed rail that'll move up and down the country, but that's really far out. So it's no time soon that this is gonna be, man, it's like the plus, the love affair. The minus, it's just so noisy everywhere. There is no peace and quiet. Oh my God, I spent 3 days searching for a quiet place to do this. All around Hanoi, nothing. There's nothing. There is no quiet anywhere. So we just did it, right here in the heart of it. The love affair is enough that it makes me want to loosen my criteria. I talked about some criteria in that Malaysia video that are all about ease of getting around and not needing to own your own vehicle. God, I couldn't do it in these big cities, but if I was staying in those smaller towns, it's just so gorgeous. So peaceful. The people are so friendly. Could I do it? Could I loosen my, I don't know. But the fact that that's even crossing my mind, the fact that I'm even trying to loosen my own criteria, that's telling. In those popular beach cities with the sea breeze, the air is cleaner, stays a little cooler. So those are nice things. Once you're staying in the places that are inland a little bit, the pollution, oh, that's another thing about these two major cities, like the air pollution also. Oh, you have to chew on the air before you can breathe it in. It's so heavy here. Oh, yeah, can you hear it? As you're moving around the country, be sure that you're using, just to compare and contrast, more than one lodging booking site. The two most commonly used and accepted here are Booking and Agoda. And it's important to be always checking them both because they both feature completely different properties, actually. Or if they do have overlap, the price will be different. So be sure that you are doing that. When you do your reservation, try to at least do it like the day before you're gonna be moving on to that spot. That's what I usually do, because sometimes there's last minute sales. I also talked about it in Nha Trang, the 2-night rule, which is reserve 2 nights in a row. Usually not less, usually not more. And the reason for that is because if you just do 1 night and then it fills up the next night, you're in for a really uncomfortable transition where you're just wasting time moving around and searching. The downside of picking 3 nights or more is if it's like a really uncomfortable bed, or there's something you just couldn't have known through the pictures, whether it's noise level or I don't know what, things you would not have known before getting there. So you don't want to be stuck with a reservation that's too long. So 2 nights is just perfect, because if the fatal flaw emerges, you can react to that pretty quickly. So I will usually give it 1 night's sleep, and then the next day be like, yeah, I can extend here. So then you go down to the front desk after that first night's sleep, ask them what their cash rate to extend is, to which most of the time they say whatever the booking rate is. So you can keep monitoring the booking rate to adjust it, or just have the cash on hand. ATMs, you can only usually draw like 2 million dong at a time, sometimes 3 million dong, which is actually not that much money. So you end up, oh my gosh, especially if you're paying cash, a lot of places won't charge your credit card, but will then have you pay cash when you get there. So you have to like go to the ATM every other day or so to keep that flow moving. There's 2 major websites that people use to reserve their tickets, right? 1-2-Go and Bookaway, which I have started using Bookaway more and more, because on Bookaway, you can screen for what has WC or a toilet on board, which is a big deal, because sometimes on these long trips, which like, so Saigon to Nha Trang and Nha Trang to Da Nang, and if you go Da Nang up to Hanoi, they are very long trips, and you don't know how often they're gonna stop. Sorry, so if you work for 1-2-Go, follow Bookaway as an example, where you can do really tight time windows of, I'm not gonna leave before this time, or I don't want to arrive after this time. Water closet. So say for example, I'm on Bookaway and I say, I only want my ride to have a WC on it. Well, then your 2 options are a VIP sleeper bus, but the train. Sure, it's a little more expensive, like twice as expensive to be on the train, but I've done it on a couple of legs, and my gosh, it's so worth it to just really fully be able to lay down flat on a, though firm, mattress, but have the option to walk around if you're stirring, you can't sleep. Cost of food, it's probably about the same. But the biggest difference between the food here and the other countries is how fresh and healthy the food tastes here. I mean, you can taste the difference. You can. I love Vietnamese food. Laundry on average. So I have never seen an actual like self-serve laundromat in country. I've never seen one. Most of the places you will stay offer that as a sort of handed over service, hand it back to you when it's done. And if they, well, whether they do or don't, half the time there's you know, a laundry service within a block of where you're at. And that cost ends up being anywhere between 20,000 dong and 30,000 dong per kilogram. So that's, you know, $1 US plus or minus some change. And any given load of laundry I do is, it's between 2 and 3 kilograms. So it's a few bucks to get the laundry done, sometimes same day, sometimes next day. You know, so the takeaway, I almost didn't even want to leave, but I have to. I don't need to tell other global travelers how cool this is, because there are a lot of tourists here, but there's very few Americans. It's a long trip to get here. You got to earn it. But if you are an American and you're on the fence about it, it's such a great place. So, oh my goodness, you got to come see it. You got to come experience it. I got to get out of town. I got to beat feet.